Hi, my name's Pharaoh and welcome to another Tip for the Day video. And today I'm going to elaborate on one of the things I touched on my first video, which kind of was just general musings about freighter building. And that was how to use the golden counter to glitch things in particular positions. What we have available to us on freighters, I get lost very easily in these menus at the moment, are the golden counter, the golden half counter, and the golden corner counter. And these are incredibly useful because they snap to each other. And they have a convenient spacing in that 3 are exactly the same as the length of a room, or at least the proper length of the room, as opposed to all of the bloated bits around the outside that are just there for decoration. So if you were, for instance, to glitch a room here and also on this one here, actually let's just delete that and put 2 in. If you were to glitch a room there and glitch a room there, then they would meet each other in the middle. The useful thing about counters is that they can snap to each other. We have half parts and we can go around corners. So we've got a good range of positions that we can choose to then use a universal adjacency glitch for. And although Hello Games mentioned snapping on freighters, it hasn't materialized yet, and we'll see if that happens. They also mentioned having struts underneath rooms on freighters, and I don't see any evidence of that yet. There's definitely nothing holding up this building. Anyway, so let's have a closer look at these counters and how they can be used. So here we are in a 3x3 square room. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this central room and I'm going to glitch a counter into it instead. Let's do that from the outside. I'm going to use the universal adjacency glitch, and for more details on that, I recently went into a lot more detail in the upside down glitching on freighter video that I just put out. But I'm going to put this into the cache. And that is definitely in the cache, because if you look at the top, it says place wire at the beginning of the menu. Then I'm going to delete the middle room here. Well, actually, I'm going to move it. And then we have directionality, so we can tell which way the counter will be. So if we position it that way, and then we glitched back to the counter, and then position a room in there, let's go and have a look at how it's glitched in. And there it's sitting. And that's exactly in the middle. And if we put 3 side by side, we can see that it's exactly on the dividing line between 2 rooms. And if you imagine we were having a whole string of them, then if we place one here and then we put 1, 2, 3, but instead of positioning the third one, we glitched to a room, we would end up with the room being perfectly snapped onto this one. So obviously we could use these for just positioning decorations. Say if we wanted to position something in the middle of a room that doesn't have snappability, we could choose that part, let's say a bed. If we want that perfectly positioned in the middle of the room, we can choose a counter and universal adjacency to it. So the way we would do that is, again, put that into the cache. Yep, place wire, we got it correct. Pick up the counter. Do a normal wire glitch And there we have a bed perfectly positioned in the middle of the room, even though it's not a snappable part. And if we were trying to snap it here, it says snap placement enabled, but it doesn't do anything. So now we have a perfectly snapped one. And of course, we could use half counters to choose our snapping position. So we could replace this one instead. Make a wider bed, as wide as we wanted to, in fact. And we could do that with pretty much any of the decorations or parts here. And we could get quite experimental with exactly how we did things. But that's just one use for the counters positioning. Let's consider things like platforms. This is on the exact edge. This is in the middle. And this would come out to an edge. So here, instead of glitching in the middle, we could glitch slightly away for a platform. So let's select our catwalk. And position it there. And so yes, this is not connected to this room. It's not connected to the door. If we walk out here, we can see that there are barriers. Although obviously if we were to use an inside-out door here, we wouldn't have one of the barriers. But it gives us flexibility about where we position rooms, walkways and corridors. So for instance, we might want a walkway that's just slightly further spaced away, that goes around the outside of a building, that doesn't sit immediately here and doesn't sit way out here somewhere. It just has a nice thinner gap. And of course there are ways of opening up the size of these things. Now the other thing about counters is that they do have cascade delete. They've all gone now. If only Hello Games could get rid of that cascade delete, these would be even more flexible. But now we have to start again if we want to reposition things. Now, one of the things I like to do is use a room that is clearly directional. If we, which one shall I use? I tend to use this one, the nutrition room, because then I can just look at the dot on the processor in the middle and I know which way I'm pointing. And so for instance, if we were to glitch it here, let's position one so we can pick it up. Go to the golden counter. If we do it pointing towards us, for instance, then it's lengthways or side to side. And so if you look at the dot in the middle of that nutrient processor, it aligns along the barrel axis. So it's kind of logical as to which way it will go when you look at that particular part. And it gives you a pretty good idea of roughly where it will be as well. I've come back to my research and development base to look at spacing. So as we were saying before, if we have a large counter in the middle of a freighter room, then 1, 2, 3 along would be in the middle of the next room. Whereas if we glitched a small counter into the middle of a room, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 along would actually be a small counter inward from the next room. And 7 along would be a small counter outward. And then if we glitched a large counter and then spaced out small counters, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would actually be half a small counter inward, and 6 would be half a small counter outward. So the smallest spacing we have using the basic parts is half a small counter, and then we can also do a small counter's worth and obviously a large counter's worth. We're going to position this particular platform half out and half in. So first of all, we'll put this into the cache. That's half out. And that's half in. Now, interestingly, half a half counter doesn't cause a complete intersection of the two platforms. Instead, we have these double railings, which look quite nice. And here, they're divided a little further than you might think. That is only half a half counter outwards. As a guide, this is the middle line. And so we've gone out half of one of those, and here we've come in half of one of those. If we were to snap rooms to those, these are very slightly intersecting. And these are very slightly divided. So let's put some doors on there. So these intersecting walls, we can't get between them. The other side would be the same. We could theoretically put doors on there on both sides. And if they were inside out doors, then we wouldn't have these railings. So a little bit of planning, you could squeeze a few extra things into your space, or just change the shape and look of the rooms a little bit. Here, they're slightly divided from each other. So again, that doesn't quite fit, but that could be a nice little decorative space. But we can't get to the door. But we could put another door inside. And we have the same situation as before, only slightly more divided from each other. No obvious gap. If we wanted to position inside outdoors, then we would probably need to glitch them in. But again, we would be using counters and finding the exact position and the exact directionality to just glitch those doors into place. And then we'd be able to walk between these rooms without these railings. A useful attribute of counters is that they are scalable. And the way that scaling works, if we scale them all the way down, then they're 3 times as small. And if we scale them all the way up, they're 3 times as large. And that's in one direction, in one dimension, they're 3 times as large. So this counter is the length of 3 smaller counters. 1, 2, 3. Which means we also have some flexibility with manual positioning and then choosing to position things. And if they are scaled down, and then we select the part. They are snappable. And so if we very carefully position that one, we now have a lot more flexibility of where we put our manual counters. And that's the point at which we are really opening up ridiculous possibilities, and I'll leave that to everybody's imagination as to exactly what we can do with that. I can see lots of interesting things that we could do just with this alone. And we can scale this one down too. And we can obviously manually position these next to each other. And we've got a good bit of accuracy with our manual positioning here, because we've got two straight edges that we can very carefully line up. From a console perspective, I'm cheating a little bit here because I'm using the see-through parts, and for some reason you can't get that on the console because you can't reprogram your keys. But even with the non-see-through part, they are actually a little bit see-through anyway, and we can very easily see whether they're lined up or not. In fact, probably easier without the see-through. You can see that edge very clearly. Bring them in. So we have, again, lots of extreme flexibility about where we place things if we're using manual positioning. And obviously, if we grab that and I don't know, let's choose a flag, something that's very easy to see what scale it is. Put that into the cache. Free placement mode. Carefully line up our part. Not going to be too careful because we'll be here forever, but you can get very, very picky about these things. Not quite at the same angle as before. Let's do it from here. That would do for the purposes of a demonstration. As you can see, it's not quite aligned. And we have a nicely scaled part in an exact position. Well, as exact as I can be bothered to do right now. So there we have it. A few different ways to use counters for glitching in No Man's Sky on freighters. I hope you enjoyed this video, and catch me again for more later. Goodbye.